Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for some of you, I suppose, in other parts of the world. Thank you very much for joining me today in this session. I am Nicolas Moes, as some of you might know already, and I'm going to talk with you about building trust in the AI supply chain. We have a very short session on this, so I will not spend too much time, but just so that you know, I am an AI policy researcher. I'm based in Brussels, where I closely follow the EU AI Act, and I am doing research here about how can industry focus more and try to develop an efficient compliance framework throughout the AI supply chain, which is quite complex, as you might know. I'm doing this research with the Global Digital Foundation, and that is why you can see on my slide, which I'm going to share with you right now, that we have actually a very nice slideshow prepared with the Global Digital Foundation. Let me share my screen with you. There is a quick manipulation that I have to do, and then there we go. You should be able to see my slides. So as I mentioned, I'll be talking about trust in the AI supply chain, and more than trust, I'm gonna talk to you about assurance, right? Because it's good to trust, but it's also good to be able to verify that you are right in trusting your suppliers or your customers in the case of AI. So the challenge that we have noticed with the Global Digital Foundation is that the public mistrusts AI quite a lot, right? So we have new laws and regulations coming to affect the industry and to ensure that like the consumers and citizens can finally trust AI anew. And these regulations are coming from everywhere, right? So in the EU, you might have heard of the AI Act, the Product Liability Directive, and the updates to the product safety regulations that's why in Europe, like there is also work on AI and human rights that is being carried out by the Council of Europe. In the US, there is still the bill that is a bit stalled on the floor about the Algorithmic Accountability Act, which is stalled in Congress. And in China, there has been also quite a few algorithmic regulations proposals put forward. The UK has also had its own set of regulations as well as its strategy, which is quite interesting as well to see the different approaches that are taken. In all these approaches, in the regulations, like the target really is the providers of AI systems. So the provider are, for example, in the EU AI Act, are really these entities that put a system developed on the market, right, or put it into service on the market as well. So interestingly, it's not only if you develop the AI system yourself, but it's not only if you develop the AI system yourself, it's also if you just put it on the market. So if you get input from somebody else on the market, this is a first step that is quite important to acknowledge, right? Is that even if you do not develop it yourself, you can be considered as a provider of AI system if you use an AI system and put it on the market. Second, that we have to look at is the implications, which is that there is increased compliance costs for these providers, but also for their suppliers, because the AI Act currently considers that relevant third parties, i.e. suppliers, should cooperate as appropriate with providers and users to enable their compliance. This is something that the AI Act mentioned in the recital, so this is not a legal requirement, but obviously the market will quickly adapt, the industry will quickly adapt to value more these providers that are under like legal requirements, will value more the supply from suppliers that are helping them in their compliance with these new regulations. And this is not only for the EU AI Act, right? We can expect over the next 5 to 10 years, new regulations in various jurisdictions coming up, which will also complexify the AI industry in terms of compliance. So just to give you an idea, when I talk about AI supply chain, let me provide you with a very simplistic examples. We have here an applicant's assessment tool provider, and we can notice that the training data supplier and the pre-trained model builder contribute to the creation, to the production of this tool that is used for job candidates assessments and that kind of. And we could imagine like that the training data suppliers is in touch with the model builder as well. This is not especially necessary. This is just a subset of the supply chain. Of course, there's many more things that are taking place at the same time that are represented by all these open-ended arrows. The problem in the situation is that, for example, in the EU AI Act, again, data and data governance obligations are real, and obviously, like the person, the actor in the supply chain that has the most effective control over it would be the training data supplier, right? And in the case of like requirements for accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity, which is that, I mean, this text is like copy pasted from the legislation currently being proposed and currently being discussed in the EU, right? So these requirements for accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity are better addressed and are better complied with by the pre-trained model builder, which is considered as a supplier. And this is something that we have to consider, is that different suppliers will have different requirements. They will have effective control over different requirements. Another example would be like, as a supplier, you provide, let's say that you pre-process LiDAR data for autonomous vehicles companies. You do that, this is your core business, and you rely, let's say, on open source algorithms and open source research and development, let's say like GitHub and other suppliers, in order to improve your own products. Well, here again, the requirements are not limited to these 3 players, right? There are many more players that could be entering in this case. And once again, like, there are different requirements, for example, record keeping policies for different players. And here you have, again, accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity, which might apply. Like, open source supply is a big deal in the AI supply chain. So this is something that we have to acknowledge. A third example, really to hammer down the point here, is take the example of a supplier of a speech recognition system, which would, like, again, have on its own, it has suppliers of like a data, so data set suppliers for different languages. Then they sell that to a certain smart speaker company, which you can, like, there are many on the markets now. This is, of course, something that, again, we have different requirements that are put through the regulations, and we have different actors that have to fulfill these requirements. Like, they have effective control over the fulfillment of these requirements, even though legally only the smart speaker company would have to satisfy those requirements. And yet, like, when we think about it, there is a bit of like complexity that is added, because as a supplier, you have multiple clients, right? So what if the smart speaker company that you see, like the first one that you saw, as a different way from asking for compliance data, as a different way of asking for compliance data than the second company, or that in a totally different sub-industry, let's say, there would actually the possibility to have like different compliance systems. So it would become very messy very quickly if, like, all of these companies were asking to prove like compliance with these requirements in different ways, right? So there is an importance in having a standardized approach as well. And of course, as usual, like, this is much more complex than just this aspect, right? This is a simplistic view of it, but I'd like to provide it as well for you to understand a bit better. So, like, the opportunity that we see is that there is a need for a standardized approach to cooperation and to providing assurance in the supply chain, right? The business case for that is quite clear. It reduces compliance costs for the providers, but also for the supply chain, right? So the suppliers themselves will have their compliance costs, like their indirect compliance costs, let's say, reduced. It reduces the liability risk, because by knowing if you provide assurance, you know, and therefore you can be more confident that there is less risk of incident and accident. There is less risk of miscommunication, and that, oh, we forgot to comply with this, or that kind of question. And this is also reduced. And in addition to that, it contributes to building public trust. I mean, I don't want to claim that it would resolve everything, but like, the idea is to also, like, contribute to a regain of public trust and like averting the techlash. The work that we have done so far on this project has been quite long, right? It's been the past 12 months. We have actually discussed with quite a lot of providers and supply chain companies in the AI ecosystem. We have also talked with some standards bodies. We have developed a minimum viable solutions for this standardized approach. And like in itself, this standardized, this minimum viable solution, taking again the example of this three node supply chain, which is just like a subset of the supply chain, which is much more complex usually. Like this minimum viable solution, it really relies on like the creation of templates for assurance files. So these files would be forms asking a set of questions, but the questions would be always the same, right? So they would be the various actors in the supply chain would fill and share these assurance files amongst themselves, right? In a pre-specified way. The form itself is like function specific, so you would have an assurance file for a data supplier, right? So the template is like is to define like a certain role in the supply chain, and that role, the actors that fulfill that role in the supply chain would have to answer this assurance file, this specific type of assurance file. And there would be another one for the pre-trained model builder that has an assurance file to fulfill as well. But then the answers to the questions that are listed on this form would be specific to the AI system that you are developing, obviously, right? So because there are different tests, if you are developing something that relies on computer vision, there are different tests of accuracy and robustness. If you are developing something that relies on natural language processing, there might be also even further tests that need to be done. And therefore, that's why the AI system each of AI system is having a set of assurance files associated with it. So to give you an example, the data suppliers assurance files could look like this, right? So this is very quick, like just for illustration, like the need here is to address, like make sure that people are on the same page about the intended purpose of the AI system, to make sure that they are talking about the same AI system, and that they are really identifying like what is the use case for that AI system. This is a concept that is very important in the EU AI regulation. And that's why this would be asked to the data supplier as well. And the data supplier is asked to describe like one of the many questions. There could be like 20 or 30 or even 40 questions and tests to run in each assurance file, but one of the questions would be specific to the description of the data selection and how the data was labeled and that kind of questions, right? So once this is filled, once the data supplier has filled that, the data suppliers sends it to the oh my god, there is like some bugs on my slides. I apologize for that. And so the point would be to share these files with other actors of the supply chain that are relevant, right? So the here, like for the pre-trained model builder, it might be relevant for the pre-trained model builder to understand what is the training data that's gonna be used. We could imagine that the pre-trained model builder has its own assurance file to share as well with the rest of the relevant players. And so the questions would be different in that assurance file, right? So these questions would be about how the model was trained, what measures were taken to ensure accuracy and robustness, and also what are the tests, like the commonly accepted tests of robustness maybe that could exist, right? So these assurance files would also provide kind of a step-by-step process to ensure that people properly measure and assess their compliance with different requirements. This is, of course, like will rely a lot on like the standards being developed. So the standard procedures to test robustness, for example. We see this. Well, we see effectively again like this that the files would flow through the supply chain based on the relevance, right? So, for example, the pre-trained model builder does not have to share a file with the training data supplier, because the training data supplier, it doesn't matter what the model is being used. perhaps right in this situation. Maybe in other situation it will matter, we don't know. And that's why like the flow of assurance file in this case from the pre-trained model builder goes only to the provider, so that the provider can then look at these files and compile them. So this is a small example, but as you can see here, like this can quickly become much more complex, right? So we have a various stepwise process. I won't go in the details here, but effectively you could imagine the actor in charge of product development taking the responsibility to send a first file describing the AI system alongside, let's say, we could imagine like alongside the signed contracts for the supply chain, and like sending them out to the data suppliers, to all the actors that might be relevant in that supply chain, right, and that they have accepted with. There is a need for then like addressing any potential issues within the supply chain itself, right? So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, the algorithm or the model builder might need to receive some information about the data sets that will be used, right? So these data sets like will be shared also through an assurance file with specific questions and with specific informations to be shared between these two type of actors, and then all the actors send back to the product development team the let's say their own files with the answers needed, and so that the product development team can then compile this into a sort of like technical documentation effectively that shows that shows how compliance has been made, and they can send that to the solution provider for further processing, to the relevant regulators if this is required, to the importer, to the distributor if it is required as part of the legislation, and to the deployer of the AI system as well if it is needed. So this minimum viable solution is advantageous because it is efficient, right? It really is asking the minimum number of questions / tasks that would satisfy the maximum number of requirements, but doing that in a way that really use like who has effective control over this, to limit really the inefficient communications the back and forth that might be needed to satisfy this. It is pedagogical, right? We are going from a legal text to an actual step-by-step tool. It is adaptive to both technological and regulatory changes, because every 2 or 3 years we can easily imagine, or even every year we can imagine like updates to the templates being used, the templates of the AI forms being used. And then like the key point is that it is cost saving, right? This would really be like the single solution for industry and for compliance and quality assurance. So the next steps in our work really is to create an industry-led coalition to build and test a working solution from this minimum viable solution that I have shown you. This will require quite a bit of this coalition would provide quite a bit of input as well about the technology, about the compliance, about supply chain, about outreach, and like they will have to really have several work streams in order for this project to become a norm, let's say. And in itself, this is something that we could embody by the creation of a non-profit, international non-profit organization in Brussels, for example, because this is really a legal entity format that has been created for this type of work. Of course, for doing that, like there is like your help is needed, right? So feel free to reach out. We believe that the creation of this small international nonprofit that would provide a secretariat for the organization as a whole, we believe that this could require up to 350,000 euros of funding, and therefore we are looking like for not only like for people with knowledge of the problem and co-creators and ASBL, but also for funders. And that's why like if you want to reach out, like do use the application, like the platform that has been set for the others. Thank you very much. I do think like I am on time, perhaps to hear if there is any question. Otherwise, like I rely on tech support and the amazing organizing team for letting maybe getting back on track in terms of timing as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Right, I'm happy to share and to answer your questions. Either right now, we have like 1 minute left, or in writing through the platform, the event platform. So I don't know if Maja wants to take back control, or Jaco. I think it might be time for you. Thank you very much.